Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 12 of the Awkwardly Big Dice podcast. I'm your usual host, Dan, and joined as usual by Rob.
Hello.
This is our D&D podcast, or our tabletop RPG podcast, where we talk about all manner of things, but generally D&D. And we have a few things to talk about this week. I guess Rob said he checked the news, but didn't see any news. I'm assuming there's no news.
Nothing
Or it's
interesting.
nothing worthy of Rob's eye, as it were. But it's probably the same old stuff. It's usually, most of the time, it's like top 10 something, or
Yeah,
have you played this game? You like this game?
clickbait bullshit.
Yeah, because not much
I saw all that stuff.
happens. Like, not generally much happens. Obviously, there's new, there can be new Kickstarters and stuff like that, and in the actual a more niche community, I suppose, of the tabletop gaming community. But on a larger mainstream scale is not usually much to talk about, so we shan't talk about any news. But we will start with the usual reminders then that this is a podcast that is available on YouTube. It's available on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. You can check out our socials on Instagram and Twitter. All of them are generally Awkwardly Big Dice, or if you're talking about X, formerly Twitter, it is Awkwardly Big Die. But we are on those. You can, you can subscribe, follow, all those different things, and get updates to when our episodes come out, and we release our shorts. So usually linked on there as well as on Instagram, and we put them up as independently separate reels.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about future content recently. I don't know what else I'm planning. I might do some sort of small content or release certain segments of the podcast in smaller chunks as well. Because we do
Good luck with
our
that.
first topics every week are usually spell of the week and monster of the week, and they kind of could work on their own, independent of the podcast as well. But for now, I haven't decided. This is what it is right now. We're doing the podcast, but we're going to jump straight in to our first two topics. For this one, I have prepared a monster. Rob has a spell.
Certainly do.
So we will roll off as usual to decide who gets to choose who goes first. It's going to go with my green dice.
I'll use my blood dice this week, the one I use for Strahd.
It's
Not bad.
lower middling roll.
Oh, it could be close then. I got a 9.
I've got an 8.
Very close.
Yeah, very close.
I think this week, I think you can go first.
I'll go first, okay. So my monster of the week, the little fella, quite literally a small fae, a goblinoid, known as the Nilbog. Or if you have not realised by the word Nilbog, because you don't see it physically in front of you, but it is actually goblin backwards. Really fun little thing, I think. It amuses
Yes.
me when I first realised, oh, Nilbog, oh, goblin, oh, I see, okay.
I absolutely noticed that. 100% noticed that.
In other words, you did not. This little fella, as you'll be able to see on screen,
Yeah.
is a chaotic little jester-y fellow who is essentially like a spirit that possesses the bodies of other goblins, which makes him, I guess, virtually impossible to kill. You can always kill the goblin he's possessing. However, when it does die, it does go into the body of another goblin. So, pretty hard to kill. At least by the lore. That
So what you're
is
saying
what it
is
does.
it's a goblin revenant.
Kind of, I guess. Except
But
without
not
the
with a
whole
vengeance.
wanting to kill absolutely everything
Yeah.
that is possibly ever caused it any problems.
I love this
But
dude's little picture. It's very reminiscent of old Warhammer goblins. Like 'cause there was always a kind of jestery type aspect to the old school Warhammer,
mm,
fantasy Warhammer goblins, not 40k.
mhm. Like goblins are goblins, I guess. He just wearing a little jester outfit. Get kind of a jestery outfit. Looked very cheerful. Um, he's not a particularly difficult enemy, but he is at the same time quite difficult
Mm.
if used in the right way. He's only a challenge rating 1. Just put him quite way down the list, but it makes him quite fun to be used at those lower levels that you usually find those sort of monsters, specifically because of the way that it is as I think I mentioned in previous podcasts, it's a monster designed not to really fight you. It's kind of not what it does. Um, so first off, we'll go through a couple of things of features of it, the main ones. But like you got Nilbogism. So any creature that attempts to damage the Nilbog must make a charisma saving throw or be charmed until the end of its next turn, and then your next turn if you try and hit the Nilbog. Uh, and the funny thing about it is it must use its turn. So if you are targeted by it and you fail, you gotta use your turn just praising the Nilbog, which I find really funny.
I love that.
It's all
That's good
hell
art. That's
Nilbog, all hell Nilbog. Oh wait, what was that? Why was I saying that?
inbuilt roleplay. I love it.
Yeah. Um, it does come with a little downside that a Nilbog can't regain hit points, including through magical healing, except through its reaction, which is my next interesting point about the Nilbog. Also, one of my favourite parts of the Nilbog, which is it has a reaction in the stat block, which is reversal of fortune. So basically, if another creature hits it and causes damage to it, it doesn't actually say hit specifically. If you cause damage to it, the Nilbog reduces that damage to 0 and regains 1d6 hit points, so 3 on average. Which isn't like necessarily going to be a lot depending on the scale. Like at the time I used it, the big issue was you only get 1 reaction per turn.
Yep.
So one of the parties hit it, it reduces it, heals only 3, but then everyone else takes a turn in it and always does drastically more. And with only 7 hit points on average, 2d6 hit points, it doesn't last all that long. Which is why when I did it, I just had it accompanied by a lot of other goblins so that it
Yeah.
could shift into those different bodies. I think I also beefed him up a bit, give him a bit, quite a number of more hit points. I think I increased his charisma as well, in order to increase the save
The
DC,
DC. Yeah,
so it
that
was
makes
less
sense.
likely to succeed. I still don't think anybody failed, if I remember rightly.
It's one
Um,
of those, isn't it?
it is, but it lasted longer because I
I think
do.
you could
Um,
have a lot of fun with this guy because I've just noticed as well, especially just what you just said about having him, uh, them, whatever,
mm.
in a big group of goblins, is the bonus action as well is kind of like the rogue
Yeah, it's a nimble
bonus action.
escape. It's
Disengage or
it,
hide as a bonus action.
yeah, it's the monster version of cunning action.
Yeah, that's the word. Cunning action. Couldn't remember that. Um, so he's there's
Common
a
among
lot. Yeah.
common among goblins. I think most goblins have it. I think
Oh, do they? Do they? Oddly enough, I have not really used that many goblins
I
against
say that
players.
that's an assumption, but I'm pretty sure, and I've seen it in goblins before. I've seen it in other creatures.
It probably is. I
It's
don't
one of
know.
the ones if you go in. I think it's a dungeon master's guide, and you can actually look up a list. I think there's a list somewhere of
Yeah,
like different features that monsters can have, and nimble escape is in there. Like pack tactics, which actually might be the
yeah.
one that goblins all have. Either way, it
I
doesn't
know
matter.
kobolds have that one. That is very like sort of mid 2000s Wizards of the Coast style, funnily enough, because having
Mm,
played a heck of a lot of Magic the Gathering back then before I got into D&D, it is very keyword heavy.
Mm,
So I'm not surprised that like back then it kind of in the monsters manual there is something like that. I've never particularly noticed it if I'm honest, but doesn't surprise me. I really like how this little pest could be just that. I agree. I
hmm
would probably buff its HP a little bit because there's always somebody, even at low levels when everybody only has one attack. There's either always a rogue or somebody with a great weapon, and that 7 HP is just going to get absolutely ruined by either of those
hmm
combinations.
Likelihood is even yeah. Even so, imagine like you got a great weapon and you only manage to do 4 damage. You
Yeah.
roll and you've not got a great. I suppose your minimum you roll like a 1 maybe, and you got a +3 or something,
Mm.
and you're like, oh well, that's a bit rubbish. But then they've still got the rest of your party to go. Like minimum what 3 people in a party? I think there's a good chance you do cause it some damage. Um, but it's not as if it's completely defenseless. It does have its scepter attack. I was going to scimitar. I
Yeah,
just saw SC and thought scimitar, but scepter attack, which is just a bludgeoning weapon, basically, it's a club.
yeah, the
Um,
bonking stick.
a bonking stick. It can also do mocking word, which is it reminds me a little bit of like almost like vicious mockery because it's a psychic attack, but not like ridiculous. It's mediocre damage, but it does give the creature that it attacks and that fails to save disadvantage on his next attack roll,
I mean, that
which
is basically a level 5 vicious mockery
mm,
because by fifth level you're doing the two times the D4 damage the vicious mockery does. So yeah,
mm.
that's literally it.
But the obviously the benefit of that one over you're using your scepter, your full scepter, is if you do only have 7 hit points, even though you healed one, if you make sure you do that on at least one of the players, if you're the DM controlling the Nilbog,
Mm,
then they have a higher likelihood of failing their attack against the Nilbog.
exactly.
It does have a couple of spells as well, notably the ones that it can do at will. So that's Mage Hand and Tasha's Hideous Laughter. Tasha's Hideous Laughter. It's not a surprise that he's very much in theme with the
Yeah.
Nilbog, and it's in its gestury ways. Uh, doesn't have any resistances as such to worry about, or what do you call it? What's the other one? Immunities. Um, but as I said, it is a pretty hard thing to kill if you stick kind of just to the lore. Which a bit of I guess it is in the description if you look at it in the new book from Volos or in Mordecai's Monsters of the Multiverse, or if you look at it on D&D Beyond, at either of those, I suppose. It does have that information on there, and it does give you the whole thing about that it turns into an invisible spirit, um, and it can basically move 30 feet. Basically, it's got 30 feet movement, which is why you probably want to have a load of many other goblins around it to keep it being quite a pest, which which is kind of what I did, as well as having him being on steroids. But
This
then
yeah,
I
a
put him
fun
on
one to just have.
steroids just so he's freaking scepter attack was a little tougher as well.
Fair.
Give him that strength.
I think with this guy, I'd just have him running away constantly and just having mocking word, um,
Mm,
disengage every turn, run away again. If he survive, if he goes down, obviously another goblin springs up,
mm,
with, and probably
but
just try and keep stealing from the party, and
mm,
maybe even have like traps
hmm
that he set up. I think there's a lot of.
he's very much fond of his tricks and his games. So it certainly makes sense. When I used him, it was the first time I played in the world that we're currently playing that I'm currently DM for, so Stormir.
All right.
So the spirit itself does exist in Stormir. It is somewhere around because it was technically not defeated in any real capacity. It was a case of a bunch of goblins causing problems, um, and vandalizing and graffitiing this like like a charity shop essentially. It's the second-hand clothes shop,
Mm.
and they even wrote the word like the word in paint on the back of the shop, like Nilbog, because I just thought it's 100% its ego is through the roof, and it definitely it wants to be praised. It's part of the Nilbogism. So I was like, yeah, okay, so it essentially spray painted. It painted its name on the back of this shop. The players playing sort of volunteer police officers, storm guard, went to try and figure this out, and they were confronted in this back alleyway by the Nilbog and all these other goblins that are around. Um, and I remember that they were trying to kill it because it was a little pesky little guy, and all the other goblins were around who were obviously interfering at the same time. And my brother, not really. I get he was playing the naive thing of his character. His character was supposed to be a very naive youngster.
Yeah.
And in a back alley with lots of windows, he cast Thunderwave to kill the
Whoops.
thing. I mean, it shattered a lot of windows. And if I remember rightly, it did that. I think it did damage the thing, or at least it hurt some of the goblins. But obviously, the
Mm.
Nilbog, to some degree, persevered. But it was fun. It was a good laugh. As I said before, I like monsters that aren't designed specifically just to hurt you. They're designed to have fun. They're designed to be playful. And they're designed to be, if anything, more annoying than
Yeah.
actually like an aggressive fight. Not too dissimilar to how I created the homebrew monster.
Cat.
The displace, yeah, the cat that could displace itself or
What's it
teleport
called?
around. Duplicate.
Duplicate. Yeah,
That's what I
that's the
called it.
one.
Duplicate.
You love being an annoying DM, don't you?
I really do. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't mind it. But it's good to try and work out if you're trying to be an annoying as a player, if you're
Mm,
trying to be an annoying DM, or whether you're giving us a fight that is kind of like what I would call more of a proper fight.
yeah.
Um, because with the cat, it was a little bit like everybody was a bit confused at first, which was obviously the intent, and it
Intent.
worked, and it was a great little fight. Um, and we had some really good role play with
Mm,
that fight. It was yeah, and I can see this little guy being quite a good recurring pest. I would
mm,
have him target the party and just pickpocket them constantly and do his best. They keep having to be keep finding out their money's disappeared and that sort of thing.
yeah.
Or maybe even leave little notes in their pockets saying that the
And
one of the
just
other
like an
players was talking
anti-pickpocket.
about them. Yeah,
Does it even pickpocket and just leave notes in your pockets? Like, I
yeah.
was here. The Nilbog has struck. Mwah!
Maybe leave a little joke with a really bad pun.
Yeah, you'd love that, man. That you would. I do too many puns as it is because of you, really. You infected my mind with the pun disease
It's a good
virus.
way to punish your players.
Uh, uh, uh.
Lol.
It's, I mean, it's just sometimes it's entertaining to do a pun. I don't know, like it can
Of
be.
course it is.
Like I'm not I'm not the biggest punster, uh, but having something it makes it very evident. I think if you use a pun, then it sets like the theme of something.
Yes,
Like I recently did the bull in the china shop thing, and literally put like a gorgon, a metal bull in an antique shop.
you did.
Um, because I thought that was if you saw that you go, oh, bull in a china shop. That's a phrase. That's a pun. That's funny. Um, I don't know if anybody else other than Rob got it, but it doesn't matter. Like
I'm going to assume they did. It was pretty on the nose,
it was intentionally on the nose. Uh, it
pretty on
was
the snout.
in the snout, upon the horns. But yes, oh yeah, as I said, love a monster creature thing that is designed not necessarily to be aggressive or to hurt you. It's just going to be annoying because that can be as it's like when I said I used a duplicate. Like duplicate was essentially the guardian of that tower in its own way.
Or wasn't
Like
it the big uh,
Yeah, it was the boss's
That boss
cat.
that we fought at the top, it was
Yeah,
their pet, wasn't
it was their
it?
pet, but it was, it was one of the guardians of the tower.
Yeah.
And the idea being that you've got to get past this cat, and you even said it at one point was, what happens if we all get charmed by this cat and you couldn't attack it? That's the
We all
same thing with
just
the Nilbog to a
chill
degree.
out.
What happens if you all fail your charisma saves and you're all cat? All you're just doing there is praising the thing. Um, but with a DC 12, I think I don't even know if I don't think your current character fits could probably even fail that, can you? Or be very hard to.
I'm going to let you in on a secret.
Yeah.
Fitz is immune to charm.
Oh, okay. Because
Because
he's
you gave him the stirring dragon ornament.
Oh, I did, didn't I?
Yeah.
That's very true. Well, maybe the Nilbog steals that. Unless it's
No
attuned.
chance.
I can't remember if that got
It
attuned.
is attuned. Yeah, it is
Attuned. If it's
attuned.
an attunement thing, then yeah, I would say that you'd know that's been taken.
It's yeah, that sits safely around Fitz's neck.
Yes.
And it also gives anybody within 30 feet advantage on charm saves, so it's not just me that
Hmm.
it helps the whole party, as long as they're close enough.
Yeah.
But Fitz
I
has to take the back, so
you guys earned that. Like you earned that.
yeah,
That magic item because you got it from a boss essentially, a crime
yeah,
boss. No, I guess not the boss of the actual entire two shot or four shot was it? I can't remember how many it ended up being, but
real thought.
it was it was it was their protection against you. To be honest, was the reason I gave it to that character. Um, and when you killed that character, well, I think you took it before you killed them.
Yeah, yeah, because we'd knocked her. Well, technically we killed her because she had the ghost thingy tattooed, didn't she? That stopped us killing her the first
Mm,
time.
yes.
So I suppose to put this into more context, we were sent on a raid slash dread slash die hard style mission
Mm-hmm.
where we were after a crime boss called Ma at the bottom of the tower because the tower was a descending tower rather than an ascending tower.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but they had an intricately woven um, ward, I suppose. If they were to leave the tower would be blown up. Um, so they had various protections against that. One
Mm-hmm.
was a tattoo that stops them dying. If they are knocked to 0 hit points, the tattoo dies instead of them, basically, as far as I'm aware. Um, the second one is so that they couldn't be charmed, which makes sense. It makes sense that they had that because it could be pretty, a pretty, high risk that someone might just say, "Oh, um, I suggest that you leave the tower with me," and that would be a very bad day for that character.
Yes. Uh,
So it makes sense.
I also knew that you were in the party and you love to charm things. Or wouldn't love to. You haven't yet actually really charmed anything, but you had that capability. Um,
I've charmed a few people. I charmed an orc to get us into that audience
you did,
chamber.
you did. I just didn't want to have it. So like there was various different things I was defending against, but one of them was definitely I just didn't want him to be charmed to just walk out because then
Yeah, it would have defeated the whole point of
yeah.
the other half of the puzzle. In that now we've beaten the boss, how the hell do we get them out?
Yes, yeah, you would just
Um,
they just would have walked out and you would have gone with them and there'd been no fights to get out. And
yeah,
they probably would have ended with a two shot. Perhaps maybe I should have. But no, it was good fun either way.
it's memorable, and it gave us there's still a boat called Mars Revenge out there
Yes, yes,
that descended into the broiling ocean of magic decay. So that's
yeah,
going to be interesting when we figure out
yeah.
what's happened with
Mars
that.
Revenge,
But
the ship that haunts your nightmare.
if I was going to run a Nilbog back to just to get us back on the Nilbog, I would call it uh, Zdun Zeeb. No, Zdun Zeed.
I don't know how you spell that, so you'll have to tell me the.
Because it's gobbling backwards, so it's gobbling these nuts.
Alright, okay, these nuts. Yes. Let's just move on to your spell of the week. You give us a rundown, Rob.
Spell of the week. I have chosen this spell because I have a love-hate relationship with it. It is Remove Curse. It is a third level spell, and I dislike it because it is a very simple spell. Is often misused, not maliciously, not in the way that we were discussing in our pet peeves last in either of the last two
Mm-hmm.
podcasts, where players try to get away with using really low spells like create water
Mm-hmm.
to drown people by creating water inside people's lungs. It's not because of that. It is two lines of text, and that's being generous. At your touch, all curses affecting one creature or object end. Full stop. If the object is a cursed magic item, the curse remains, but the spell breaks its owner's attunement to the object, so it can be removed or discarded. Now, even I have played this spell wrong in the past. I have used it to remove curses from magic items, rather
Okay.
than just simply break the curse as well as its attunement to whoever was wearing the item. The DM let it fly because they also didn't know any better, and then it's only when I've gone back and read it and I'm like, that did seem a bit easy to just break the curse, because for me the breaking of a curse is probably a mini adventure in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's also a lot of uh, curses, realistically, that other than the spell bestow curse, um, are big narrative things like lycanthropy. If a player gets infected with lycanthropy and they have the curse take and they're a
Mm-hmm.
were boar or a werewolf or a were rat or whatever animal or even a warehouse, they you've likely making it a campaign theme or at least a small running adventure theme, and to be able to just go third level spell that I got at level 5 removes that, is a bit easy. Also, the player might not want it removed as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Most people would choose to play werewolves. Probably wouldn't.
yeah, so it's another way for I think almost a I as much as I've never seen anything like this in our groups or any of the groups I've played in. I've heard horror stories. Yeah, I've watched plenty of Crit Crab and so forth and so on, where people have used it in a toxic way and been like, haha, I've got rid of your werewolf curse and stuff like that. And it's just like, it's just a bit of a, yeah, I think it should be either a higher level spell
Mm-hmm.
or there should be um, more detail to it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've seen because there are regular mentions in whether it be magic. I think mostly magic items. Uh,
Mm,
with regards to it, and it was how it would if I had a custom curse as I prefer to do, and
yeah,
I didn't want remove curse to be the answer to that. You just make it say can only be removed by the wish spell
yes.
or something like that. That is generally the counter to the remove curse. Um, because it's like I get like because the big thing as well I think with remove curse is that it is available to quite a broad range of spellcasters. So you've got your
Yeah,
clerics, your paladins, your warlocks, and your wizards. So it's not just your divine casters, which you might I would think of being the ones who would know how to do it. So your clerics and your paladins,
yeah.
but to also have it in your warlocks and your wizards is mm,
The thing that
um
strikes me as weird as well is that it's available to warlocks and wizards. Why not sorcerers? Why not just you've
why
gone
not
already to
bards?
warlocks and wizards? Why? Yeah, why not? I mean, bards can take it anyway because of the way they work, but that's kind of in one. But yeah, still, why not bards? Yes, so I do appreciate it as a spell.
Hmm.
I just think it is an ill thought out spell. I think it should be more complex. I don't like that you have to basically put a caveat on the end of, so a curse, like you've just said,
Hmm.
cannot be removed by the remove curse, or can only be removed by a wish spell or something like that. I would prefer it to work like um,
Okay,
dispel magic
just the magic. Okay, I've got
or
that as literally I've got
counterspell.
that open because I was going to mention it.
Because like with that, you have to make a roll, don't you, based on
Hmm.
the DC of the spell.
Hmm.
So like, I think it would be way better personally for every curse that
Hmm.
is in an adventure or an item to just have a DC, and then you have to meet that with the remove
Yeah, you could
curse.
easily do that as a caster of its DC, right? So most time curses are cast, or if not cast, they're connected in some way to magic, right? Because there's
Yeah,
magic, because there's magic. Um, but yeah, then again, though, dispel magic is also one that is regularly misunderstood as well.
true. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it is.
the people would think that they can use it to remove the magical qualities of a magic item.
Not an easy feat. That you can't just go around destroying magic items willy nilly.
No, so dispel magic does not do that. That's
No,
not
it
what
doesn't.
happens. But people do misinterpret it to believe that is the case. Um, which I it's probably very similar to be fair with remove curse. But yeah, it's a very simple spell, and I can see it from some point of views of like, well, you want your earlier spells, your early level spells to be simpler, easier to understand, and then the complexity comes later. So maybe that's
Yeah.
the thought process. Of course, there are some spells that are a bit complicated than they're early on.
Mm,
I always think of spells that are like, not this particular early level spell, but things like your glyph of warding and stuff, where they're just like big, massive bodies of text, and you're like, oh, I'm
yeah.
gonna have to read that. Maybe
Yeah.
I just don't take that because it's just a lot of text. This one is the counter to it. Uh, I also think it'd be better with material components. Cost.
I agree. Yeah. It really feels just almost um almost from a video game point of view, it almost feels like so typically in a lot of MMOs and stuff like that, like World of Warcraft, there's usually buffs and debuffs.
Hmm.
And there's usually certain casters
Hmm.
will have something as an ability to remove debuffs from players, and or something else might have a different ability to remove buffs from
Mm.
bad guys
Yeah,
if they're buffing themselves, and those are two different things. And it kind of sometimes feels to me like an attempt was made when designing this spell
and bestow curse.
and and bestow curse to kind of like work that way,
Mm.
but it's just yeah, I just think it's just a bad job.
Mm.
Like a bit more detail needed putting into it.
I liked it in Baldur's Gate 3, if I'm honest. There was a point where a woman was a sheep and she was cursed, and you could see this totem was around. I thought, oh, you have to destroy this little totem in order to remove the curse, and you keep destroying it,
Mm,
and it stays, and it just teleports around the room.
yeah.
And I just went over to her and cast remove curse with my paladin.
Mm,
She was a human again,
yeah.
revealed who the bad guy was, um, and so it was useful. I think also with the paladin, because you were a half caster, it kind of feels a little more earned.
Yeah. I mean, as a paladin, you'd have been at least what, level 9 to be able to have a level 3 spell.
Something like that. I think I was max level
Yeah.
when I did it.
Oh,
Um,
fair. Yeah.
or max level within the game, so 12, right?
12. Yeah, I think it's 12.
Um, so I was 12 in the game. But that's really the only time I've ever used it in any D&D sense. Um,
Yeah.
I get the benefits, and I mean, don't tell Joe, but he's cursed right now. He knows he's cursed. This would work.
It just break the attunement, wouldn't it?
Essentially, yeah.
Would it break the contract though?
No, the contract is separate from the curse in his situation. So, the curse essentially means that if he dies, his body will be well. It can't willingly unattune,
Yep.
and if he dies, he's bound to bring the key back. That is the
Yep.
curse. Contract is the other part of it.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. And I think as well that kind of almost just going back to that Baldur's Gate discussion
Hmm.
brings me to the other point that curses aren't super clearly defined
No, they're not.
um, in D&D. So like you mentioned being turned into a sheep. My
Hmm.
instant thought would be that's polymorph. That's not a curse. I know that's not a curse. That's a concentration spell. So what the hell? Then? But like you can still have someone cursed to be in the form of an animal. Um, but when you're getting down to like rules as written, it's like I would prefer it to be much more clearly outlined.
Mhm. Yeah, I think in that circumstance, within the context of the game, I had assumed it was a curse simply because of the little totem thing that was
Yeah,
giggling and jumping around, opposed to it being a polymorph, because there was no. Well, I suppose there was technically with the entity that did it was there, but I mean,
yeah,
you you don't consider like dispel magic would be the counter to a polymorph, of course.
yeah, yeah. Exactly. It's again, yeah, it's just a slightly weird one. And I do, as much as I'm happy to homebrew fix stuff.
Mm.
Um, I always slightly galls me when I have to do it. Um, because I'd rather homebrew stuff just to make things different and fun in other ways,
Yes, yeah,
rather than go, oh, I'm
agreed.
homebrewing this because it's shit.
Hmm. I always look for because when I create something, I want to go. Right, I want this to be what's happening, or this is the spell or ward. Like, for example, when we had our recent Hotel of the Dead, so or the Hotel del Luna, right?
Yeah,
I wanted it to be protected by a Hallow spell.
yeah,
Um, or, but really what I wanted was that I only wanted undead and no other magical creatures to be able to end it. Obviously, humanoids, the Hallow spell has no effect against anyway, not one of the
yeah,
options. I just want to prevent anything else from going in but humanoids and undead. So I was like, how can I magically do that? So that's when I started going through different spells to figure that out, and Hallow is the one that does it best.
yeah.
There's a few others that are kind of on there. If you want to look up things like Forbiddance, that's a good one. And then you also got Mordecai's Private Sanctum as well.
Yeah, yeah. There's a few of modern kind of stuff in there.
All three were on that place. Though technically, I can't remember if it was the one of them I had slightly adjusted so that it worked in the context, but I used them as a foundation because I always go try and find the spell that a spell for it that works first. Then if I can't find one, then I homebrew. Um, of course, curses are one of those where there isn't an example really of curses, unless you want to go to magic item curses and you start looking up magic items that are cursed, and look at those as a foundation as something
Mm.
to go from, which I've done. I did when I created a cursed item for the big ass scimitar that was in our Nuri campaign
Uh, yeah,
that belonged to the Afriti. Um,
yeah. The one
that
that
curse was
is
based on another one, but had its own thing.
that was that similar to backbiting or?
I can't remember which one I looked up to be honest
Mm,
to learn what the thing was. Um, but that was removed by remove curse because that's what
mm.
the angel fella did. The diva.
But that was done correctly. That just broke the attunement
I did
and
because I read the spell before I used it.
yeah, and yeah. So that's just it. Just annoys me as a spell. There we
No,
go.
that's fair. That's fair. There are many spells that are annoying, and we will cover them at some point.
Mm.
Um, well, I mean, some cantrips are disastrous, but we will save those for another time.
I thought for today I would pick a spell because I've mostly so far picked my favorite spells
Mm.
or spells that I think are interesting. I think I know it said Hallow then because I was just looking at the Hallow spell. I think Remove Curse is potentially an interesting spell. I just think, yeah, it has not had the justice done that it deserved. I think it
Yeah,
would
it's
be a
one of
good
the.
spell.
I think it's one of those that is simple intentionally, but doesn't really help in a grander sense when the word curse is not clearly defined in
Mm,
Dungeons and Dragons. Unless you want to talk about bestow curse, and then you can say, well, it only applies to bestow curse, but you should mention that in the remove curse spell because it
yeah,
mentions remove curse in the bestow curse spell because I've got it in front of me now, but not the other way around.
to have just one spell that's the absolute counter to another spell is just horrendous, though. I mean, I get that shield counters magic missile, and
But
that's
it's
a weird little
not its
caveat. But
only
yeah,
purpose
it's
though.
not. It's not its main thing. It's just a fun little gotcha moment that you can use.
You could also argue you could combine remove curse with dispel magic and make them the same
Yeah,
freaking thing. Well, I don't see why you wouldn't do that.
yeah,
Um,
100%.
but we will move on from
Will.
Rob's spell of the week, that being remove curse. Move on to another topic. One that we've touched in the past.
Mm.
We've talked about, because we've talked about them before. We've talked about actual play, you can call them podcasts, if you will, or actual play
Mm.
shows. And we're gonna we don't want to talk about our opinions of different shows. That's not what we're really
Yeah.
addressing. Because yes, we have opinions on shows. Some we like, some we don't like, and vice versa. It's more about their impact
Yes.
upon the general community, or more specifically on new players or people who have yet to play. One of the most famous ones in uh, probably probably a bit unfair to the namesake is the Matt Mercer effect.
Yeah.
Because he's not the only one. He's one of the most well known, of course, and he does like no, it's like sound effects, which is a big
Mm.
part of it. Um, but it's probably not fair to pick out him when there are other DMs as guilty as he is.
Yeah. I mean, actual plays are great. Um, in many ways, they're great at teaching new players what at least D&D can look like.
Hmm.
Um, they're great. In fact, one thing I will say that is probably my favorite thing about actual plays is that it's good at showing people that um, it's it's fine to get in character. It's
Hmm.
great to get in character, but it's also not mandatory. Although you'll see all the cast members of Critical Role constantly in character.
Hmm.
Um, you won't see them all doing it to the same level of quality. And if you watch other actual plays, there's plenty of times you'll see a lot of people just speaking in their own voice because they're not trained voice actors. So you'll see plenty of people that'll be very happy to get in character, and it's good for people to see that. It helps maybe take a little bit of that um, nervousness away from role play. Um,
Hmm.
but at the same time, the elephant in the room is that you are watching a production,
As
and
much
I
as
think that's
especially Critical Role does like to talk about it just being friends around the table playing D&D, it is a
Mhm.
production. They as probably my main point of the entire discussion really is you shouldn't use it to set your expectations for your own games.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
I learned a lot from Critical Role. I know like I would say over half my D&D knowledge comes from watching Critical Role or
Yeah,
Dimension 20. Because both of those DMs are good DMs, and though I wouldn't say necessarily all their players, from a purely mechanical standpoint, are good players, but they're great. They seem to be having fun, which is a big part of D&D. And like you said, with the role play, yes, they role play, but they're also having fun, and it shows how fun the game can be. Um, but also like how it's a to me, D&D has a strange balance between um a serious game and a fun and like a silly fun game. Well, you
yeah.
got to take it serious to a certain level, but beyond that, it's just silly and fun and a lot of dick jokes.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Especially when detect thoughts is used.
Mhm.
But I think like that's one of the things is I as much as I just don't have time to watch any actual plays.
No, they're long.
I play too much D&D. I also now do a podcast.
Hmm.
I find time to actually sit down and play video games. I play plenty of those as well. I
Hmm.
mean, there are times when I could watch an actual play, but it's like at the end of the day, I just it's a struggle to watch a 4 to 5 hour show every week.
Oh yeah.
But I think one of the things that I actually quite like about the show, Critical Role, and the show Dimension 20 specifically, because I've got most experience watching those,
Hmm.
but I would assume it would be true for all of them, is that it's actually you get to see everybody, one, make mistakes, and it helps teach that it's okay to make mistakes. And
Mhm.
that chimes back to literally one of our first, I think it might be actually our first podcast episode that we did, where we
Mhm.
were talking about tips for new players, and one of the
Yeah.
things I said was it's fine to make mistakes. DMs and players will constantly make mistakes, but
Mhm.
it's also good to see what one of the things they do, and I think Brennan maybe does it a bit more in Dimension 20, is rule of cool it,
Mhm.
which can be a two-edged sword.
Of course.
There are definitely bad times to rule of cool it where the rules are being stretched far too much, and it's important to have a framework and a foundation or at least like a reality ceiling.
Mhm.
Um, However, if someone says, "Can I attempt a little bit more of a risky maneuver in the middle of combat? Is there a risk and is there a benefit if I do this?" And I see Brennan do say yes to a lot of that stuff. He's great at doing yes and on that particular type of rule of cool. Um, and I think it's quite good to just see the DMs make snap decisions when they need
Mhm.
to adapt to their players completely ruining their plans. Sure, we've all seen memes of good old Matt Mercer tearing up a sheet of paper.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
We could do a whole thing on rule of cool and rule lawyers and all that sort of stuff.
oh yeah,
Lots of opinions in that area. Let's avoid that. Um, but yes, the mistakes, 100%. You see mistakes, and even better part of it is to see that yes, someone makes a mistake, but the ability to move on and continue even though that
yeah,
mistake has happened, and to correct in future. Um,
yeah,
is important as well. Um, but yeah, that there are a lot. Like I think I originally wanted to play D&D because I'd watched an actual play. I think it's either I watched an actual play or I watched Community, and in Community there's the whole dungeon. There's a couple of episodes about Dungeons and Dragons as well.
yeah,
Not really Dungeons and Dragons. It's kind of the vague, like covers the vague parts of it, but definitely makes it seem fun and interesting. Um, and then I remember, I think I watched an actual play. This was long before I watched Critical Role or any of the others. And I remember I thought, oh, that's really cool. It's just kind of like it's a game, but you're on adventures. You're playing characters. You could get
mm,
into that. I think that fill a void that needs to be filled in
yeah,
my
yeah,
entertainment catalog. Um, so yeah, it inspired me to play D&D. Taught me a lot. I think even that probably taught me. Remember, I can't remember what the show was called. It was a Rooster Teeth D&D show. Actually, technically, I think it was Achievement Hunter D&D show back in the day before Achievement Hunter went downhill and don't exist anymore. Um, but they uh, they did that. And I think the DM was even like he was probably more accurate to the rules than I think even Matt Mercer is. Um, I think the big thing takeaway is there are things you can learn, but you should not set your expectations. Don't expect the same thing.
yeah,
For one, there can be, but depending on largely depends on your DM, but there can either be a lot more dice rolling in actual D&D that you sit down at a table, or there can be a lot less. um, but typically, I think you'll find there's probably a lot more dice rolling at a table.
yeah, maybe. Um, yeah, I think another facet to the. I'm sure nobody really likes the term, but the Matt Mercer effect.
Mm,
I would call it the live play effect. Yeah,
mm,
but I think actually it is more. The thing I'm going to raise now is more of the critical role effect. Is that
mm,
because it's become so big?
mm,
I know a lot of people that have almost accidentally on purpose emulated it.
mm,
Um, so like when I first started getting back into D&D, because I'd played it a little bit here and there back when fifth edition first dropped, and I had a friend years ago at uni that ran me through one or two sessions in I think probably was fourth, maybe 3.5. I didn't really
Well, it's
read any of
10
the
years
rules.
next year, isn't it? For since fifth edition started.
Yeah, so this will be like 17 years ago. But then, so like, I dipped in and out of it very sporadically. But then when I got back into it with some work friends,
Hmm.
probably about 6, 7 years ago now. Um, is it that long ago, or is it a bit less? I don't know. Critical Role season 2 was just starting. There'd been like 2 sessions.
2018 then.
18. Oh, okay, so less ago, 5 years ago then, um, or so. Anyway, what kind of I say almost problem we had is that we all kind of got into it quite a lot,
Mhm.
um, and there was one or two players that would just try and replicate the characters that were being played,
Okay.
whether it was from season 1 or season 2. Um, they it wasn't done fully on purpose. I don't think. I think it was just like I like that so much, I want to do that
Hmm.
myself as well. And, and I, Sam will know that I'm referencing him here, so I'm not gonna beat about the bush. I love you, Sam, but there was one shot we did just when season 3 Critical Role was starting, and he put on like a country American accent, and I was like, "Oh, I wonder where you've picked that up." Yeah, it was. It gave us a bit of a laugh and a bit of a chuckle, but it also, gave him the idea to use that accent. And there's
True.
nothing wrong with just using an accent. The
No.
character itself that he was using was not a rip of
No. No.
Laura's or Sam's character. It was a monk that he was applying it to, if I
Okay.
remember correctly.
Yeah. Well, there is a difference
Yeah,
between inspiration
yeah,
and
there
just
is.
ripping something off. Um. Yeah, it's one of those things where I think a lot of people from how if we're talking specifically Critical Role, suddenly just wanted to play Tiefling clerics or probably Tiefling clerics. To be fair, I think were probably the most popular ones.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I will admit that I think when I started DMing properly my own stuff, I think for the first few times I DM my own stuff, it was different because I wasn't proper into Critical Role then. But
Mm,
later on, when I dived deep into into the world of actual plays of Critical Role, a little bit Dimension 20, Dungeons and Daddies are always my go-to. I watch a little bit of High Rollers as well. Um, I remember watching and a couple other things on various other small on more gaming video game focused channels.
mm,
Um, when I went down, when I sort of that became my main entertainment form of entertainment became actual plays, and I really just wanted to start playing. I was definitely heavily influenced by the style of Matt Mercer more than anybody else.
mm.
Because I felt that at the time, at least, he was bringing those world alive, and as a DM, that's what you want to do: bring a world
Yeah.
alive.
Yeah, that is definitely one of the positives to as a DM, because I learned to DM by watching people DMing me and Matt Mercer.
Hmm.
It was much later that I got into Dimension 20. I will definitely go on record and say I love Brennan's style over Matt
Hmm.
Mercer's. That I like them both.
Both
Um,
good in different ways, or
they're great
sometimes the
in
same
different
way.
ways. Yeah, 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 very true. There are definite crossovers in styles. I'm much more of a Brennan type of DM, I think, personally, but I don't know. Someone might correct me on that.
It's
Um,
your opinion,
but
subjective.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, so it's definitely got its ups and downs. I think it gets a bit of a bad rep. One thing I will as well kind of go on and say is I've noticed that um, to come out and say that you don't necessarily like Critical Role or don't necessarily watch it gets quite a lot more stigma than it deserves attached to it.
Does.
Um, yeah, it gets. I think the fandom is definitely got its darker side, and I suppose that happens with any fandom eventually when it
I
gets
think it
big
does. It
enough.
get
But
to a big enough size, it becomes like a. You always got your minority that sometimes shout louder than the majority. I don't think
yeah,
that's the case in life, unfortunately. I think when people are annoyed or pissed off or just upset in some way, then the
mm,
likelihood is they're gonna make everyone else know about it. Whereas if you're happy and content with something, you don't always say anything.
yeah.
And I generally
I
find
think
that's fine.
I think it has quite a probably going off a little bit on topic with this particular offshoot, but I think it's quite a big risk factor with any live play that because it's done in almost such a personal way, like you can tell that any live play that you watch, you can tell that everybody there is friends,
Hmm.
gets along really well. It has to work that way in order for it to work.
Hmm.
Look at season one, look at that guy that got basically booted off
Mm.
and all the drama. It wasn't working there. Everybody else is always such great friends in whatever live play you typically watch. Um, that I think it's quite easy to almost have that streamer kind of thing
Yeah,
happen where
the
you get a little bit,
parasocial relationship.
yeah, where you feel almost like you know them, because you do see such a lot of them and you do see
Yeah,
almost a more personal side. And I think especially with Critical Role because they used to do a lot. I don't think they do it as much anymore, but they used to do things like Christmas Day specials and where they'd unwrap like
yeah.
fan mail and presents and
I don't
stuff.
watch them anymore, so I can't say really. But I know they still do like behind the scenes stuff, so I know it's still a thing. And yeah, with any sort of back in the day we call it new media, but anything internet media related, it has the chance of developing parasocial relationships with its audience, where the audience, whether it's due to their own personal situation or feelings of loneliness or any sort of mental health issues, can end up uh, feeling rather attached to them or feel like
Yeah.
you know them when you actually don't. It's that whole thing of like people getting angry at like a an actor because they're in their favorite movie and they're the bad guy, so
Oh
they
yeah.
think that's who they are, but that's
Mm.
not who they are.
Or an actor that was in a piece of media that was written particularly poorly or was changed because it was an adaptation and it was changed in ways that fans don't like. And when they go after the actor rather than the people that made those decisions,
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
always, yeah,
And that a lot of time
that's,
comes down to, and again, you see it in all of them with this sort of parasocial relationships. It's simply often just a lack of information or knowledge.
yeah,
So rather than just saying I don't know what's going on, they just make these big people make assumptions, and it's actually fine to make assumptions. A lot of life works on assumptions.
it does.
It's about how you act based on those assumptions that's the important
Yeah.
thing. At least in my opinion, my perspective. Um,
But yeah, live plays.
yes, live or actual plays, whatever you want to call it. I recommend people watch them. I would say watch them, especially if you're a new player. Um, I always used to say if you were new to D&D, and I always used to say watch at least a few opening episodes of Campaign 2 Critical Role.
Yeah, that's probably the sweet spot. Um, or if you want to watch something quite digestible,
Hmm.
although a lot of Dimension 20 is on the thing that I've
Drop
forgotten the
out,
name of that you have to pay for.
drop out.
Dropout TV, thank you. They do have a whole season of Unsleeping City available on YouTube, and the episodes are only 2 hours
Hmm.
long. I think there's 18 episodes.
Hmm.
So whereas Critical Role lasts a year to two
Hmm.
years, that's very much watch it and be done with it and learn
Hmm.
a lot from it in the process, and it's
Yeah,
great. So
I think it's a different thing. I would never say to someone who is yet to play or is a new player to go watch Unsleeping City because it's
no,
different. It's very different,
it
and
is, yeah,
it's the
yeah,
great thing about it, and it's generally the great thing about a lot of Dimension 20 is the way it's that it's different yet not at the same time. I would say go watch
yeah.
Fantasy High if you're a newbie. That's probably a better shout. Um,
I always forget about that one.
with because that's the first one that they did,
Yeah, I think all
as
that's on
my
YouTube as
understanding.
well.
Um, but if I always think there are I think with Critical, I said before, Critical Role Campaign 2, the first few episodes, for some reason it sets expectations really well for the
Yes,
entire for just in their own space with their own show, for the story and everything, the characters. Um, but Matt does a really good job of introducing everybody. I really like Brennan's general way of doing it, which is different.
yeah,
But I think Matt does a great job with that. It's the host starting in a tavern, which is a cliche but works really well, and he does that.
yeah,
So and I think it's a great example of something to watch. You can obviously learn things from non-actual play YouTube channels and things like that as well. If you want to spend some time diving into that, always recommend things like Ginny D or XP to Level 3 are great to learn from.
Yeah, Awkwardly Big Dice are pretty good as well, I think.
I think those guys are okay.
Now they shite, don't watch them.
um, I wouldn't say we're necessarily we're great for beginners. We are more of I would say of a DM tool set more than a player tool set, to be honest.
Yeah, we've not really tried to be good for new players. We've just tried to kind of talk about what we like and what we don't like.
Yeah, pretty much. We just like to talk about D&D, and so we do. Um, but yes, I think that's a good ending point for that topic. We've got a good episode of the Awkwardly Big Dice podcast. It's episode number 12. We're getting along. We're getting old. Not legal yet, but a bit
Getting
way
there.
off. Getting there. It's closer and closer to adulthood. Um, but yes, this has been episode 12 of the Awkwardly Big Dice podcast with Dan and Rob, your friendly neighborhood dungeon masters, your warlock and wizarding friends, for all your we don't really do lore, but all your knowledge on D&D as a game, I suppose, and insights and tips with regards to roleplay as well.
Mm.
As I start, I end. Check out our social media: Instagram, Twitter, obviously YouTube, where you'll be watching this. Give us a subscribe. Yes, give us a subscribe and a like to let us know you enjoyed this episode, and of course, leave a comment. Give us your insights. Give us some tips on like your favorite actual play
Mm.
shows. Like, don't mind that discussion. Good discussion.
Yeah, yeah. Let's have a chat. Do like comments when we get them. Always nice to engage with people.
Of course. But we will see you next week for episode unlucky number 13.
Aye. Goodbye there.
Goodbye then.